So I got a question from someone the other day who asked about two things. First of all, what technology did I learn about while I was doing my master's? And what technology should librarians know about when they become librarians? This is a great question. My school, when I was doing my master's, actually hired me to teach technology in the core workshops, which was super fun. I love teaching, as you could probably guess from this video. But I also have some strong opinions about that stuff, so I am happy to answer this question. So to answer the first part of the question, what technology did I learn about when I was doing a master's, I would recommend watching this video up here. I go over every single class that I took during my master's, and that'll give you an example of what technology I learned about. As for what technology is important for librarians to learn about, this is where I'm just going to caveat this with, this is all opinions. My opinions, based on my experiences both not being a librarian and being a librarian for a little while now. Your mileage may vary, and not every librarian does the same thing, but based on how I think information works and how librarianship as a profession works and the direction that it's trending towards, here's my advice. The first thing I would recommend is learning a little bit about web design, and you can do that with two ways. The first way is to learn HTML and CSS. These are a couple of languages that you use to actually build web pages. So if you go to a web page, you'll see how the text is one place, and you might have a picture or a video, and things move and flash. All of that is done with HTML and CSS. Now, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and is used to put together the structure and the content of a website, so that's what you actually use to put in the words and the pictures. And what CSS does is it lets you take these different components of a website and make them look a certain way. Now, I think that these two things are very important for librarians and information professionals to know about, not just because of the website building element, but because they really help a person understand how documents and how information gets presented. If you look at this video, that there should be a link to appearing now, that was where I talked about how books are designed and how there is a distinction between the content of a book, so the actual information that the book contains, and the book as an object. And when you learn HTML, I think it kind of does a really good job of cementing the idea that the information and the object can be separated, and you can change the object that is the information container to kind of change how people interact with the information itself. My favorite metaphor, because I'm a big nerd, is think about in The Nightmare Before Christmas, you have Jack Skellington. And Jack Skellington wears two hats in that film. First, he plays the role of the Pumpkin King, where when he's doing his thing, he's got this really nice getup, really sharp, tux-looking thing with the little bow tie that has little tendrils. And, sometimes he wears a pumpkin on his head, but that's him as the Skeleton King. The other role that he plays is as a Santa, basically, where he's got his red outfit and, he does all of these things. So if we use this metaphor to understand HTML and CSS, you can think of it this way. HTML is what you would use to put together the entity that is Jack Skellington. So the head, the shoulders, the knees, the toes, all of those bones, and even the personality, those are Jack. And you put together Jack with an HTML document. Now, the CSS, the cascading style sheets, is what lets you change the style of Jack. So you can have one style sheet that makes Jack look like the Pumpkin King, and you can have one that makes him look like Santa Claus. At the end of the day, Jack is Jack no matter what, because the HTML is the same, but how he looks differs depending on what style you apply. So that's HTML and CSS. If you want to learn more about these, you can go to codeacademy.com. I highly recommend it. I put a link in the description, but that's what I would use when I was doing workshops, because Code Academy lets you basically cut your teeth on different programming languages. So the other part of web design that you should know about as a librarian is content management systems, or CMS. So the nice thing about content management systems is they let people build websites without having to know HTML and CSS and all of the other components that go into building a website. Content management systems like WordPress are a thing that lets you build websites much in the same way that you put together a document in Microsoft Word. What you see is what you get. Content management systems are super great though, not just because they're easy to work with, but because they also give you a really good sense of how content on a website is laid out. So a website has lots of web pages in it, And if you want these web pages to be accessible and useful to the folks that are seeing it, you want to make sure that they're organized in a way that makes sense. If you go to a university website, for example, and you look across the top, you'll see that like most universities have approximately the same layout across the top. You've got like admissions or prospective students, you've got current students, you've got faculty, sports, all of these different headings, and then under those you have subpages. And content management systems are really good because they let you lay these things out logically and fiddle with things and move things around until it gets to something that works for you. If you want to try out content management systems before you get to grad school, if you haven't already, you can go to wordpress.com. WordPress is actually the content management system that I think most of the internet runs on. I will look that number up and put it right here so you can see how much of the internet uses WordPress to operate. But if you start learning a little bit about WordPress now, that will help you in the long run. Now, the third piece of technology that I think all librarians should know about how they operate are relational databases. Relational databases are basically what let you take a bunch of different pieces of information and organize them in different ways so that later on you can go and find those pieces of information easier, much like a library. It seems a little obvious to us, perhaps, in the library field and information field about how that works. But until you actually start working with relational databases, I think it's a little hard to understand just how complex of a thing that is. And once you start understanding the complexities of how databases work, I think it really helps you understand how we organize information and how we can do it better. So there's that. If you want to learn about how relational databases work, again, you can go to Code Academy, and what you want to look up there is SQL, SQL, which stands for Structured Query Language. SQL is the backbone to almost all databases. It's fairly straightforward, and I think it's super useful to use. Once you learn a little bit about SQL, you can create your own database in Microsoft Access, and you can also do some interface stuff in that, so that's a good way to learn. You can look up tutorials about Access. But yeah, databases, good stuff. Now finally, the piece of technology that I wish I had learned about when I was in grad school that I didn't learn about is what's called an LMS or an ILS. So LMS stands for Library Management System, and ILS stands for Integrated Library System. And these are basically a suite of software applications that you use to make a library run. There is the library's catalog, both the front end and the back end, so the interface part and the part that does all of the organization where you can't see it. There is the website that a library has that patrons can go and search for stuff. There is patron information. And basically what an ILS and an MLS do is they connect all of these things together so that you, as a librarian, can satisfy the information needs of your patrons. I wish we had learned more about these, but I understand why we didn't. And to highlight why we didn't learn that about that in grad school, I did a quick phone survey yesterday of a bunch of libraries to see what ILS or LMS they use. So here in Metro Vancouver, most of the libraries use Horizon. So Horizon is created by a company called Circe Dynix. We actually use that at the library I work at. LA Public Library uses Carl, which is by the Library Corporation. Las Vegas, Sacramento, and San Francisco use Sierra by III. Portland Public Library uses Symphony, also by Circe Dynix. And then the two of the local universities here, UBC and SFU, use Voyager and Alma, both of which are by the company Ex Libris. As you can see, that's like 5 different pieces of software by like 4 different companies, and that just goes to show that there are a lot of options out there. Now, if you want to learn a little bit about how ILSs and LMSs work, you can go on the internet and look up what's called Library Thing. And Library Thing is basically a free library catalog that you can use in your own time to organize your own books if you really wanted to. And let's be honest, if you're thinking about becoming a librarian, you probably do. So those are the 4 pieces of technology that I recommend learning about if you want to be a librarian. But that is, again, all of just my opinion. What thoughts do you have? Leave comments down below. And if you're already a librarian, what did I miss? If you haven't already, consider subscribing to this channel for more information about libraries and information science. And until next time, thanks for watching, and don't forget to ask questions. Right? Right. Okay, bye. Dog, look, it's a camera. Bye, humans!